Imagine sitting down with George Orwell today, not to talk about the dystopian worlds he wrote about, but to ask him a simple question: who is really in charge? If we could ask him, he might not point to a secret room of shadowy figures. Instead, he might point right back at us, at the way we think. His core idea was that the most powerful form of control isn't always forced upon us from the outside. Sometimes, the most effective control is the control we willingly accept, often without even realizing it. It's the stories we tell ourselves that keep us from seeing what's really going on. He put it bluntly when he wrote, "The secret of rulership is to combine a belief in one's own infallibility with the power to learn from past mistakes." Think about that for a second. It's not just about a leader who never doubts themselves. It's about a system that makes us doubt our own doubts. This creates a natural tension we all feel every single day, a quiet war inside our own heads. On one side is our instinctive thinking, the fast, automatic part of our brain that wants quick answers, craves certainty, and hates feeling confused. It's the part that makes a snap judgment and then digs in its heels. You probably recognize that stubborn feeling of being right, that immediate defensiveness when someone challenges an idea you hold dear. That's your instinctive mind putting up a wall. It wants the world to be simple and clear-cut. On the other side is a deeper awareness, a slower, more thoughtful voice that asks questions, that's comfortable with nuance, and that's willing to admit it might be wrong. This is the part of you that can step back and observe your own thoughts. The friction between these two forces is where the real battle for understanding happens, not in some faraway capital, but right between your own ears. We all do this. We all cling to ideas that make us feel safe and smart. Remember when you were a kid and you realized a belief you'd held for years wasn't quite true? Maybe it was about a holiday figure, or why the sky is blue, or a simple story about your family. That moment of realization is a little crack in the wall of your certainty. It's a small personal example of your deeper awareness winning a tiny battle over your instinct to just believe what you're told. As adults, we stop questioning in the same way. Many of us cling to familiar ideas because they form the foundation of our identity, our politics, our sense of how the world works. To question them feels like a threat to our very selves. So we don't. We surround ourselves with people and news that confirm what we already believe, creating a comfortable echo chamber that constantly reassures us we are right and everyone else is misled. This is where we start to fool ourselves. And this is exactly what Orwell warned us about. When we refuse to question our own assumptions, we hand over the keys to our own perception. An invisible government doesn't need to force-feed us propaganda if we are already eager to consume information that makes us feel justified. It doesn't need to censor us if we willingly censor ourselves to avoid social awkwardness or cognitive dissonance. The strings aren't always pulled by a sinister puppet master. They are often strings we have tied to our own fingers. We become the puppets and the puppeteers, acting out a play we think is real, all the while convincing ourselves that we are completely free. We see the world through a filter built from our past experiences, our fears, and our desires, and we mistake that filtered view for reality itself. Orwell's principle here is about the corruption of language and thought, how using vague, meaningless words or overly simplistic slogans can make real thought impossible. When we can't think clearly, we can't see clearly. We get stuck on the surface, reacting to emotional triggers and tribal loyalties, never diving deep enough to question the underlying mechanics of power. We fight over symbols and labels while the real structures remain untouched and unexamined. The goal of this invisible pressure is to make this shallow, instinctive thinking our default mode, to keep that deeper, more critical awareness asleep. Because a population that is busy being certain it is right is a population that is not asking difficult questions. This cracks open the entire conversation and forces us to look at the world not as a simple story of good versus evil, but as a complex web of influences. We start our journey in a place of comforting simplicity. We see the world in clear categories, trusting the headlines we read and the official stories we are told. It feels solid, predictable. In this phase, our reactions are immediate and certain. We know who the heroes and the villains are in any given news cycle. This is a comfortable space, much like the passive acceptance Orwell warned against, a place where we consume information without questioning its source or its purpose. It is easy, and it requires very little from us. Then, inevitably, comes the confusing middle. This is the phase where the simple narrative begins to fracture. You might be someone who resists change at first, clinging to the old explanations because the new information feels too unsettling. We start noticing small inconsistencies, things that do not quite add up. A politician says one thing and does the exact opposite. A corporation is fined for wrongdoing, yet its profits soar. A media narrative shifts suddenly and without explanation. Most of us feel uneasy during transitions like this, a sense that the ground we thought was solid is actually shifting beneath our feet. This is the challenging part Orwell described, the moment we must choose between continuing to accept the comfortable lie or embracing the difficult, unsettling truth. It is a period of genuine intellectual struggle, where the easy answers no longer satisfy, but the hard questions have not yet provided clarity. You may catch yourself pausing before reacting lately, hesitating to share that article or repeat that talking point because a tiny voice of doubt has begun to speak. This difficult middle phase is not a sign of failure, but of growth. It is the essential, messy work of digging through the layers. We have to sit with the discomfort of not knowing, of realizing that many things we held as certainties might be flawed or, worse, intentionally manufactured. This is where we learn to discern. We begin to see the difference between a knee-jerk reaction, which is often emotional, tribal, and based on preconceived notions, the kind of unthinking response that Orwell contrasted with thoughtful engagement, and a thoughtful response, which requires patience, research, and the courage to form an independent opinion outside the noise. The knee-jerk reaction seeks the comfort of the crowd. The thoughtful response embraces the solitude of critical thinking. Out of this struggle comes a new, more resilient clarity. It is not the false simplicity of the beginning, but a nuanced understanding built on a foundation of questioned assumptions. We no longer see a single puppet master, but understand the mechanics of the entire stage, the economic incentives, the political pressures, the social engineering. We start to recognize patterns and strategies rather than getting caught up in individual events. This clarity empowers us. It moves us from being passive consumers of a narrative to active interpreters of information. We learn to ask better questions, not just of our leaders and media, but of ourselves. Why do I believe what I believe? Where did that idea come from? This is the application of Orwell's call for intellectual decency, a personal responsibility to seek truth despite the overwhelming pressure to conform. We realize that the goal is not to find another simple story to believe in, but to develop the critical faculties to navigate the complexity forever. The world is still complicated, but we are no longer afraid of that complexity. We are equipped to meet it. Through this discomfort, we begin to notice something shifting. It's not a loud, dramatic change, but a quiet recalibration happening just beneath the surface of our daily lives. The things that used to trigger an immediate, frustrated reaction now sometimes give us pause. We might catch ourselves mid-sigh, about to complain about the same old thing, and instead, a new thought emerges. Is this really worth the energy? It's a small moment, but it's significant. It's the first sign that the internal work is starting to pay off in our external world. We are not becoming different people, but rather, we are becoming more of who we actually are when we're not weighed down by outdated stories and borrowed expectations. This process is deeply personal, yet it follows a pattern that many of us share. You'll likely find daily decisions coming easier. What to wear, what to eat for lunch, which task to tackle first. These minor choices that once felt like tiny burdens begin to flow with a new sense of clarity. It's not that the decisions themselves are less trivial. It's that the mental noise that surrounded them has quieted. The part of you that used to agonize over every choice, fearing a wrong move, starts to relax. You begin to operate from a place of trust in your own judgment. A trust that was always there, but was buried under layers of second guessing and the desire for external validation. This is one of the most practical and welcome rewards of this journey. Many notice old frustrations don't bother them as much. The colleague who always interrupts, the traffic on your usual route, the endless stream of notifications on your phone. These irritants don't magically disappear, but your relationship to them transforms. They lose their power to derail your mood or your afternoon. You start to see them for what they are. External circumstances, most of which are entirely outside of your control. The energy you once poured into resisting them, into mentally arguing with reality, becomes available for other, more fulfilling pursuits. It feels like reclaiming a part of yourself you didn't even know you had lent out. This isn't about becoming passive or complacent. It's about choosing your battles wisely and conserving your emotional energy for the things that truly matter to you. This newfound space in your mind allows for better questions to emerge. Instead of asking, "Why does this always happen to me?" you might find yourself wondering, "What is this trying to teach me?" Or, "How can I respond in a way that aligns with who I want to be?" This shift in questioning is everything. It moves you from a position of powerlessness to a position of agency. You are no longer a victim of your circumstances, but an active participant in your life. This is where real growth accelerates. We start to see challenges not as inconvenient obstacles, but as opportunities to practice our new understanding, to strengthen this emerging version of ourselves. As we practice this new way of being, we inevitably encounter setbacks. There will be days when the old patterns feel comfortable and familiar, and we slip back into them. This is not failure, it is part of the process. It's in these moments that we learn the most about compassion, both for ourselves and for others. We realize that everyone is fighting their own internal battle, operating from their own set of fears and conditioning. This realization fosters a deeper sense of connection and empathy. We stop taking things so personally because we understand that another person's reaction is almost always about their own internal world, not a reflection of our worth. Gradually, this internal shift begins to influence our relationships. We become better listeners because we're not so busy formulating our own response while the other person is talking. We become more present because the mental chatter about the past or future has diminished. We set boundaries not as walls to keep people out, but as fences to protect our own peace, which in turn allows us to show up more fully and generously for the people we care about. Our interactions become more authentic, less performative. We are no longer trying to prove we are smart or funny or capable. We simply are, and that is enough. This journey inward, as challenging as it can be, ultimately leads us outward with a renewed sense of purpose. The clarity we gain about ourselves helps clarify what we want to contribute to the world. We might feel drawn to new projects, different forms of creativity, or simply to being a more grounded and calming presence in our communities. The energy that was once consumed by self-doubt and people-pleasing is now free to be channeled into something meaningful. we discover that true fulfillment doesn't come from checking off society's boxes of success, but from aligning our daily actions with our deepest values. Together we discover that the most profound freedom isn't about the absence of rules or responsibilities. It's not about rebellion for its own sake. It's an internal condition, a quiet knowing that you are the author of your own life. It's the liberation that comes from questioning the scripts you were given and deciding which parts, if any, still serve the person you are becoming. It's the courage to define success on your own terms, and the resilience to stay true to that definition, even when the world suggests otherwise. This freedom feels less like a triumphant victory and more like a gentle homecoming, a return to a self you always were but had forgotten. And in this space, we find a truth that resonates across time, a key insight that George Orwell so eloquently captured about the nature of true liberty. He observed that freedom is the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. But more than that, it is the profound and personal victory that arrives when we stop telling ourselves the stories we no longer wish to hear, when we silence the internal critic that parrots the fears of the world. This hard-won freedom, this ability to simply be in your own mind without apology or need for permission, is a feeling that is both exhilarating and deeply peaceful. It is, as he so perfectly put it, like finally taking off shoes that never quite fit. The relief is immediate, the comfort is profound, and you wonder how you ever managed to walk so far in them in the first place. You stand taller, your stride changes, and the path ahead, while still unknown, feels entirely your own to walk.